Working here, so we will get started. So good morning, and welcome to this Canmore Local Assessment Review Board hearing. I'd like to remind everyone that the ARB hearings are open to the public and that this hearing will be recorded and streamed live. So this video recording will be our record of the hearing. We have 3 hearings this morning, so we will be starting with tax roll number 10641, and the municipal address is 426 4th Street. So I'll start by introducing the panel and then ask the parties to introduce themselves. After that, I will explain our standard hearing procedure and ask for comments in that regard. So my name is Jen Marin, and I'll be the presiding officer this morning, appointed to the panel. The other panel members with me today are John Pedwell and Christoph Breyer. Does anyone have any objection to the panel as constituted?
Nope.
Good. Okay, great. So I'm going to have the parties introduce themselves as well. So starting with the complainant. So Kathleen, if you could please state for the record your name, organization, and your role in the hearing, and please indicate whether you are the owner of the property under complaint.
Yeah, it's Kathleen Maroney, and I am the owner of the property that I filed a complaint against for 26 4th Street.
Perfect, great, thank you very much. And to the respondent, would you please state for the record your name, organization, and your position within the municipality?
To turn this on. Oh. My name's Deanne Bannerman. I'm with Legacy Municipal Services, and I'm the appointed assessor for the town of Canmore.
Perfect, thanks, Deanne. So thank you. The LARB standard practice is to have the complainant present all of their evidence first, followed by questions from the respondent and then the panel. Next, the respondent will present their evidence, followed once again by questions from the complainant and then the panel. The complainant will have an opportunity for rebuttal, and then finally both parties will have an opportunity to present their final argument and summarize their evidence for the panel, with the complainant presenting first. If anyone needs a break or if a problem comes up, please just let the panel know as soon as possible and we can address it as we go. I'll also take this time to remind everyone to please turn off their mobile devices as well. Any questions regarding the procedure today or how this is going to move forward, or is everyone satisfied with the process as it was laid out?
Yep, it's fine.
Good. Okay, perfect. Great. So both parties have exchanged disclosure evidence before the hearing. To save time, I'm going to propose that we mark all of those documents for the record now. It won't stop anyone raising questions about admissibility later. If there are any questions, we can deal with them and strike material from the record later if necessary. If everyone is okay with that procedure, the clerk will read the evidence into the record.
Yep, fine.
Good. Okay, perfect. Lisa, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Jen. For tax roll 16823, we have complainant package C1, which is 10 pages.
I think it's different tax roll.
Oh, 10641, sorry. We have complainant package C1 with 10 pages of the complaint form. We have complainant package marked C2, which is the complainant disclosure of 4 pages. And we have the respondent package marked R1, which is the respondent disclosure of 61 pages.
Perfect. Thanks, Lisa. Before we move forward, are there any preliminary issues for the panel to address? Deanne? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to raise a preliminary issue with regards to the evidence package C2 because it was never received by the property assessor. So, you know, when disclosure timelines are given according to the MGA, they must be followed, and any evidence that's introduced late or not introduced to both parties should not be considered by the board, and we'd ask for it to be omitted. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Deanne. Panel members, questions or comments, or do we go to the complainant for a response, Lisa? It's your decision. Okay. Sure. Kathleen, do you have anything you want to add about that? There's just the preliminary issue is that the second evidence package was received late and not received by the assessor.
Yeah, it's fine because it is just a subsection of my original complaint anyway. So there's no new information in there that I'll be using anyway.
Okay, great. So I think we will remove that evidence because it was not received on time and was not received by the assessor. But it sounds like it's not going to impact anything if it was a summary. Okay, great. Thanks very much. Okay, we're going to start the presentations. So for the complainant, Kathleen, if you're ready, we're ready to hear your evidence. If you're ready to go ahead and share that with us. Perfect.
Thank you. I'm sorry, can I just ask for the name of the third panel member? I've got Jen and John, but I missed the third fellow.
Yeah, the third member is Christoph Breyer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, first of all, I know that the original complaint had also the subclass issue in it and another issue of bias relative to assessing the subclass complaint. And we all know that's been dealt with in a completely different legal process. So based on the first point, the bias point, I think I hope we can all agree that it's not relevant for this hearing, and I would just like to basically omit it. And really, my issue is on the property valuation methodologies, etc. So is it okay if I just move straight on to that?
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So I just have basically a statement question. It says in the respondent package, it says that the appraisal is based on the market modified cost approach, and it's also got an element of mass appraisal process. So I know these are very technical things, but I've sort of hopefully, grasped the intent and purpose of both of those in my argument and my analysis. So am I right to say that that is in fact the methodology we've used for the Town of Canmore property appraisal process? I think that's probably a question for Ms. Bannerman.
Do you want to?
Yeah, and I'll address those issues during my own presentation a little bit later.
All right. Well, just based on that, the Town of Canmore argues that, or you've argued in your response that in my case, because this is a larger lot with a cabin that was built in 1962 that is, it's basically condemned, and I have to remove it from the land, or the land won't be insured, etc. So the I guess we call them improvements on the land are actually valueless, which I argued originally. In 2021, the last year where the breakout data is available for that property, it was assessed at, I got to get out, there's a lot of numbers coming, sorry. It was assessed at $1,096,000, of which of that, $132,000 were the buildings. There's no data breakouts available until I got the respondents package for 2024 that showed that the value of the buildings had been decreased to $2,000. So over those 3 years, it lost $130,000 in value. I don't disagree with that, but it wasn't information I could readily, get my hands on. So when I did the evaluation, I took the idea of the broadest market group that I could take. And also in the respondents package, I'm told that land is the most significant driver of the property's market value. And in many cases, improvements constructed on the property only offer nominal value to the property's overall value. So it basically says it's the value of the land that's important, not the building that goes on it. In many cases, it's a nominal value. So I'm taking all of this into account, and I can't make sense of my assessment. So between 2001 and 2024, my value went up 54.5%. The average of the entire neighborhood, including old, larger duplex properties, you name it, was 46.5. So mine was roughly 8% higher just based on that. If I take out the property of the land, or the value of the land at $130,000, my property went up 77.4% against 46.5. If I look at just the 24 to 25, it went up 23.9% against the average of 32 properties around me, old, new, big, small, of 7%. So overall, over those 4 years, I have the oldest property, no improvement whatsoever, against 3 other properties in my entire neighborhood, of population of 32 homes that had a higher valuation, and all of them have new homes on them. So I struggle to understand how this land was valued as it was. And if I look at the principles, the mass appraisal process and market modified cost approach, I can't make sense of it. Now I go to the respondents' property collection that they've provided, and they've provided 7 properties. 2 of them are in the same district as mine, the same street. The other ones are much closer to Millennium Park, which we know are much more valuable. None of them are double lots. And when I assess them during the assessment review period, of those 7, 3 had new builds in process. One of them had R2 with 3 residential properties on it. One was upgraded, and there's 2 there that I can't determine, and driving by, I can't tell what's happened. So 5 out of the 7 are completely different to mine. So if we're saying that these properties are only assessed for land value, and these valuations don't make any sense at all compared to mine. And if we say the value of the buildings do, it also doesn't make any sense. So based on that, and taking the average of the neighborhood that I'm in, and taking account of the fact that my buildings are worthless, or well, they're worth $2,000, I have simply requested that we take the $130,000 out of my 2024 assessment value of $1.51 million, which brings it down to $1.306 million, and then apply the neighborhood or the average mass appraisal increase, which brings my assessment up to $1.35 million, $1.35400. It's as simple as that. And I do agree that we could take more and more data. And as a result of this exercise and the respondents, I did go back and do more investigation. And it doesn't matter how broadly I throw open my data net, it comes back with the same information. And I sadly was not able to include 2 other double lots that would demonstrate this completely clearly. So that's my case. It is based on interpretations of assessments. It's based on pure data provided by the town, and a little bit further information provided in the respondents package. So based on that, I'm simply asking for a fair and common assessment of the property, which would reduce it to $1.35400.
Great, thanks so much,
That's
Ms.
it.
Maroney. Thank you. Ms. Bannerman? Okay, sorry, any questions from the panel? Okay, yeah.
Just in case. Sure, already. So I'm going to go through the presentation that we have for the property at 10641, 426 4th Street. In it, I'll demonstrate that the assessment is fair and it is accurate in comparison to all other property assessments in the town of Canmore, and that we're going to be asking for the property assessment to be confirmed at $1,710,000. So the key issues before the board are, and this is on my page 3, whether the complainant has met the evidentiary burden of proof under section 460 sub 9 of the MGA to demonstrate that the assessment is incorrect. and then also whether the assessment has been prepared in compliance with provincial legislation using fair and equitable mass appraisal techniques. So on pages 4 through 6, we have an exterior photo of the property as well as aerial maps depicting where the property is located in the neighborhood. So now onto page 7. The subject property is located in the South Canmore neighborhood. It is a residential detached property legally zoned as Plan 1095F, Block 86, and it includes lots 7 and 8. It is zoned R1, residential detached, with a year built of 1962. The parcel is 13,301 square feet, which is approximately double the typical lot size in the town of in South Canmore neighborhood. So improvements on the property are given nominal value, as redevelopment potential and land value are the primary drivers for this site. Also, the property was previously purchased on October 12th, 2016 for $1,550,000. While this is not adjusted to the current market conditions of July 1st, 2024, it does provide context for the assessment history. So now on to pages 10. We'll just give a little bit of background on property assessments in Alberta. So the property assessments for the town of Canmore are prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Municipal Government Act and matters relating to assessment and taxation regulation. Alberta legislation prescribes that property assessments must be prepared based on market value. Market value means the amount that a property might be expected to realize if it is sold on the open market by a willing seller to a willing buyer. Property assessments for the 2024 assessment year must be an estimate of the value of the property on July 1st, 2024, which is the valuation date, and reflect the physical condition of the property on December 31st, 2024, which is our condition date. So the legislation further stipulates that an assessment of property based on market value must be prepared using mass appraisal, must be an estimate of the value of the fee simple estate in the property, and must reflect typical market conditions for properties similar to that property. Mass appraisal is the legislated methodology used for valuing individual properties and involves the following process. Properties are stratified into groups of comparable properties. Common property characteristics are identified for the properties in each group, and a uniform valuation model is created for each property group and then applied back to that group fairly. So in preparing the assessments for the town of Canmore, the principle of highest and best use is applied. This is foundational to assessment and appraisal practice. It requires that each property be valued as though it is put to its most profitable and legally permissible use, given the physical, legal, and financial constraints. Residential detached properties in the town of Canmore are primarily valued using the market-modified cost approach to value. This approach is a hybrid of both the cost and the sales comparison approaches to value. And under this approach, all improvements are first valued based on the cost approach, and then the values are modified or adjusted to correct the market conditions at the current, based on the sales transactions as of that July 1st, 2024 date. So it's the most appropriate method of valuation because it mirrors the actions of buyers and sellers in the marketplace, and because there's sufficient sales data to rely on the market estimates. The reason we use this approach in the town of Canmore is that the market data demonstrates that the underlying value of the land is often the most significant driver of a property's market value, especially in redevelopment areas. As we've seen in South Canmore, there's very few of the older homes left. And in many cases, the improvements constructed on the property will contribute only a nominal value. So the market-modified cost approach analyzes the property's land value separately from the value of any improvements and is considered to be the best methodology to value these properties. So now onto page 15. That is the case with the subject property given its age and its characteristics. It is likely that it would be sold based on its underlying land value. Likely, the lot would be subdivided and it would be redeveloped by any eventual purchaser, likely into 2 single detached homes. The assessor, therefore, has assigned only a nominal value, as mentioned, $1,000 for each the house and the garage, to a total of $2,000 for the total assessment for that property. So the value of this property is primarily due to the land being 13,301 square foot lot in the South Canmore neighborhood. This is a highly desirable neighborhood in the town of Canmore. And as mentioned, there's a lot of redevelopment that has been done in there. The typical lot size in South Canmore is approximately 6,600 square feet, and the subject property is also zoned R1, which supports single detached housing. So on to page 16. The onus of proof really does fall with the complainant. They must prove that both the current assessment is incorrect and that the proposed value is correct, and that's on page 17. We have board decisions to support this, which can be found on pages 17 to 20. The year-over-year assessment increase as well. The complainant relies on the 13.25% increase from the 2024 to 2025 assessment as evidence of unfairness. And according to Alberta legislation, each property in a municipality must be assessed on an annual basis. Increases alone are not grounds for a reduction. Assessments are created anew each year, and the differences in rate changes across the town or even in a neighborhood are expected. Further decisions can be found on pages 20 and 21 to support this. And I just want to reiterate at this point, looking at percent changes or year-over-year percent increases, that doesn't take into account what our basic assessment principle is and what we have to follow according to the legislation, and that is to have the value of the property set at the market value, so the most probable price that it would sell for in the open market. So now on page 22, this is where we've provided sales comparables of properties that are similar to the subject property in terms of location. They're all in the South Canmore neighborhood. They're all R1 zoned properties, so they all support the development of single detached homes. And these are all sales of properties that will likely be or have since been redeveloped since the sale. So they sold as vacant land or redevelopment land. The subject property has approximately double the lot size of these comparables and is large enough, as mentioned, to be subdivided to support 2 single detached homes. These sales do support the assessed value for the subject property given that context. And in contrast, on page 24, the properties that the complainant has suggested are comparable to theirs are shown. I've put them in a list there. And the complainant references properties on the same street, but these differ significantly. Most have typical size lots at approximately 6,600 square feet, whereas the subject subdivision potential and double lot size creates a superior redevelopment profile. Several of the properties provided by the complainant have modern habitable housing, not like the subject. In addition, the last 6 properties on the list are of duplex dwellings and are zoned R2. So of the 31 properties provided by the complainant, only 9 sold, and 2 of those 9 sales occurred after the valuation date of July 1st, 2024, and those being the property at 21411, the tax roll number, and 10597. And both these properties sold after the valuation date and really should not be considered by the board as any type of adjustment to any assessment. So the remaining property sales that do share similarities to the subject property are the rolls 10600 and 10601, which both support the assessed value of the subject property, given that they are less than half the size of the subject property. So now in summary, we respectfully submit that the 2024 property assessment for the property at 426 4th Street in the amount of $1,710,000 is correct, fair, and equitable, and has been prepared according to the legislation as well as appraisal best practice. The complainant has suggested that the fair way to value this property would be to remove the prior improvement value, which is $130,000, from past year's assessments from the total value of the assessment, which doesn't make a lot of logical sense given the fact that we already have that value removed. It's gone to the land component, and we are only valuing the property with a $2,000 nominal improvement value. The subject property is a large 13,301 square foot lot located in South Canmore. Due to its age and condition of the existing improvements, like mentioned, only a nominal value has been attributed to them. Market evidence, based on the sales that the respondent has provided, it shows that redevelopment potential and underlying land value are the primary drivers of value in this neighborhood. The lot is approximately double the size in South Canmore and has subdivision potential for 2 detached dwellings, making it superior to the comparables cited by both the complainant and the respondent. The assessor has further demonstrated that annual assessments must be created anew each year, independent of prior assessments or board decisions. The comparables relied upon by the complainant are not sufficiently similar to the subject property, particularly given its exceptional lot size and redevelopment potential. In conclusion, this evidence establishes that the assessment of $1,710,000 is consistent with legislative requirements, supported by market data, and equitable with similar properties in Canmore, and we ask the board to confirm the assessment. Thank you. I'm available to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Ms. Bannerman. We now go, Ms. Maroney, do you have any questions for Ms. Bannerman?
I have a couple. Yes, we have all the precedent case or the relevant cases where some of these points were argued. However, almost all of them are commercial, like Safeway versus Calgary and those sorts of things. It's a completely different ballgame than at least what I think I'm dealing with. So I understand your thoroughness in providing some of the legal arguments and some of the precedents that have proven your point. However, it would be more helpful if we could maybe get some of those that are a little bit more residential and a little bit maybe more familiar to, just simple property owners who are trying to understand the valuation process. That's just a comment. The other question I have is, when we were doing the assessment, why you say that these properties have to have common property attributes and common property details in order to be like for like. All you've given me are properties that you admit or you've classed as land value only. I'm not sure how you've done that or why you've done that, but why didn't you go after any of the double lots that were there where you could clearly see that mine was overpriced compared to them? Why couldn't, and you say it's done every year independently, then why am I the only one going up by 23.4%? I don't understand it. And you say it doesn't make logical sense to take the building out. Well, you have taken the building out, but I wasn't appraised of that information. So you say it's the burden of proof is on us, but where do I get all this detailed information? I know I can write to you and you can come back to me, but do I write 25 times asking for, can you break this out? Can you break that out? I did request a breakout of this information. I was told there were no breakouts available post 2021. So how am I supposed to prove, that this assessment is based only on the land, that this assessment doesn't include, dilapidated, condemned buildings? And how do I prove that this is fair? And it's a genuine question. I don't know how I can prove it, because this is your opinion of how these sales were undertaken, land value only. That's your opinion. You don't have to state on your purchase or your sale that it's for land value only. So I'm not sure how you make that assessment. I'm not sure why that's proof. But if it's proof, how do I get it? How do I find out this information?
Okay, so I heard a lot of statements and a few questions in there, so I'll do my best to attempt to answer them. And I'll just go back to your previous statement with regards to the board decisions that we provided and court decisions that we provided. So the principles of assessment are the same regardless of what type of property it is, whether commercial or residential. The principles of assessment are the same in that we have to use mass appraisal principles and that we have to value the properties at market value as of the valuation date. So regardless of what type of property is there, these were decisions that support the legislation, which doesn't change depending on property type. So with regards to the information that you would like to receive, obviously contacting us during the inquiry period, we could provide you with that information, even so far as, land versus improvement breakdown, and we have to many people. So that's something that could be discussed outside of having to go to the Assessment Review Board if that was such information that you were requiring. In regard to the sales of double lots, why we've provided, and I did admit, yes, the comparables that we provided were the best comparables to your property. But there were no sales of double lots, during our evaluation timeframe, so there were none available. When we prepare our comparables to support the current assessment, we're looking at the 3 years of sales from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2024. And we're using that group of time-adjusted sales to show the best support for the current assessment that's under complaint.
Okay, I understand. And I guess what I'm experiencing is that we have two separate sets of data. You have access to sales data going back 3 years. Joe Citizen doesn't have that access. So all we can go on is your assessed values and what we can get off the website. And, we can't, it's a very sort of high level assessment value. And we're not allowed to get details of other people's homes. So I come back to my question, what kind of proof are we expected to provide and how do we get it? It's not easily available and I've been trying for a few months now. The town of Canmore's been great. Every time I've asked for information, they've given me everything they can. But it's still not enough to, come back to you with sales analysis and so on because we can't get some of that data that you use. So what kind of proof can I provide that talks to your data that we don't have access to?
Sure. So during the inquiry period, so after the assessment notices are mailed around mid-February, there's 67 days for property owner to, inquire into their assessment to the assessor. At that period of time, when we do get these inquiries, we do provide the sales of the relevant properties to the property owner so that they can see where their property fits, their property assessment fits in relation to the sales of similar properties. So we don't publish, the all-encompassing list of all the properties that's sold. Other people, when they've been preparing for hearings outside of the information that they would have received from the assessor during the inquiry period, some people have gone to realtors and asked for support on that basis as well. So there are opportunities and information available to property owners for when they're preparing for their complaints at the Assessment Review Board, but the information that the assessor provides them on the onset during the inquiry period should be sufficient to satisfy or at least bring up that there are errors in the calculation of the property assessment at that time, which then we would deal with.
Okay. And in terms of sales is fine, but for instance, if I have my list of 32 properties, can I go back and ask for details on those as well? Like what the breakout is between improvements and land value?
You could. So there is a mechanism through the Municipal Government Act. There's a Section 299 and 300 request. And so if you wanted to see the detailed breakdown of your subject property, you would do a Section 299 request. If you wanted to see the detailed breakdown of the multiple other properties that you have listed there, then you could do a 300 request. Of course, there's a cost to the property owner to get such information. And the information that I've provided through my disclosure, even the comments on the spreadsheet that shows the property details, that's sufficient enough to show what the differences are, the major differences are between your property and those ones that were listed as that you felt on your street were comparable.
Right. So this common appraisal approach, mass appraisal approach, I'm still trying to understand with everything you've given me why everybody else's property did not go up by at least my property value. If it's based on the property price increase, based on recent sales, if it's just based on the land, why didn't everybody's go up at least as much as mine?
So that's where it's difficult when you're looking at a percent change, a year-over-year percent change, rather than looking at the overall market value, is because every year, as mentioned, we do prepare the assessments anew. We have an additional year of sales. We drop off a year of sales because we're using a whole new 3-year period. And we're time adjusting them to the current market conditions as of the July 1st of the current assessment year. So with all those changes, we're getting more information from some properties, less from others. But it's really, this is where it's misleading because a lot of properties will change at different percentages based on the new information that we have. It could be that the properties were assessed lower than they should have been in prior years, but now with more information, they've been increasing at a higher percentage than others. But it really is, like, the focus really should be, rather than a percent change, it really should be the market value of your property. Would your property most likely sell on an open market for the $1,710,000, which I think is probably even understated, given the fact of the sales that we've provided in on our pages 22 of the single lots and their sale prices with redevelopment. In reality, if your property sold and was subdivided, you would probably get double what the typical land sale that we had on page 22 would have been, which would have been far greater than the $1,710,000.
Well, I think that's conjecture, but thanks for your opinion. I'll come to you when I want to sell. All right, well, done. We've avoided a realtor. No, I'm not selling. The only other comment I want to make is you brought up the sale price of 1.55 in October 2016. The reason I paid that price was because of Mr. Carter, and Mr. Carter had lived in that property since the late 40s and had built that cabin himself in 1962, and I bought it for the very specific purpose of avoiding it to go into mass development. He originally wanted that price, and I could not afford it, and for a year we talked about it, and it wasn't until I basically went into retirement. I agreed to overpay that price because it was Mr. Carter, and I knew I wanted to keep that property for myself forever, and et cetera, et cetera. So just like you can't take an undervalued sale, I don't want you to think that 1.55 was the value of the lot in 2016. I overpaid as a commitment to Mr. Carter to value the land and do something valuable with it, not turn it over to developers. So that is why I paid that amount, and that's why I've held on to it for as long as I have. So now I have to do something with it because my insurers have told me they will not insure the land any longer because of the liability, the buildings on it. So that's the background, and I just want to put that out there. But it is a new process to me. I now know that I can do a request $299 or $300 for a fee for each one. And so if I want to truly compete like for like on data, it will cost me probably hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get the data. Is that what I'm hearing? Instead of the town just providing it?
Yeah, no, and so that's not exactly what I said. I said that,
Okay.
We do provide a reasonable level of information during the inquiry period. There really shouldn't be any need for a property owner to have to go through a 299-300 request because we do provide a good number of, a good amount of information. So if you look at the residential ratepayer reports that we have included in our disclosure for your property and as well as our comparables, that would be the level of detail that you would receive just by having an inquiry with the assessor.
Okay. My last question is, how do you assess, you put in your comments that it's land value only. How do you come to that assessment?
Okay, so it's basically through history with the town of Canmore, specifically with South Canmore. I mean, it's the best example out there. I mean, we have Lions Park, we have Homesteads and Three Sisters, Older Part, and things like that. But it's the best example, and really, it's usually using a judgment call. It's looking at the property, the age of the improvement on the property, the size of the improvement, the quality of construction of the improvement on the lot, and if that property doesn't support a resale and a renovation, like so, for instance, your property. There's no amount of renovations that you could do to that property to bring it up to what the character of the neighborhood is in South Canmore. So looking at those types of things, then we make the determination to lower the quality classification to basically the fairest out there, which is appropriate for your property, knowing that you said it's practically condemned and can't be insured.
It is.
Yeah, so I mean, so that's what we're looking at is basically the improvement value, and it's a judgment call. It's why we're assessors and we have our accreditation. We make those judgment calls, and it has over and over again been shown that these properties are either being held to hold, like yours is, or they're going to be torn down and a new improvement is going to be built on there.
Okay. Is your comment, whether it's being assessed at land value, is that something that will also be available to me when I ask for additional information?
Yeah, and that's information we would have provided, through the inquiry period. We would have told you that you have a nominal value and what the nominal value would have been on your improvement.
Okay, then that's fine. Well, sadly, I don't think your properties here really are relative to mine. But I still maintain that, my increases have been completely outside the norm for the surrounding area and the other properties, especially the ones, that are most relevant in my area. So I maintain my position that this needs to be reviewed, and in the case of the buildings, reduced. And that's it for me, signing off.
Thank you, Ms. Maroney. Are there any questions for Ms. Bannerman from the panel? John, please go ahead.
Yes, question for Kathleen. I'm not
Yep.
clear. Did you talk to the assessor during the inquiry period?
Yes, yeah, no, well, I didn't talk to them, but I did talk to them once, but we had several emails back and forth.
Okay, because I'm not sure I'm hearing this right, because the respondent is saying you had an opportunity to get various details of the assessment, land, and building breakdown, and I'm getting the impression that you didn't take opportunity to do that, but you're saying you did.
Well, when I inquired about the various properties, I wanted to know how the land was valued versus the dwellings or improvements, whatever we're calling them. And I was told that breakout is no longer provided since 2021. So it wasn't until, it could have been a misunderstanding on my part, but I did want and I did need that information. And it wasn't until I saw the respondent's package that had that form on it that said at the bottom in the very last line said assessment value 2,000. So that's when I knew that they did do that breakout. But I'm not sure whether or not that's available to me. I did ask for it originally. And I was told they no longer break out property and building values. It's just one assessment value.
With us, the email
Sorry.
chain's with us and introduced into evidence. It really depends on how the question was phrased at the beginning and how much the follow-up was as to what information we would have provided. Generally, we don't publish the land and improvement breakdown anymore on the public website here with the town. So it really depends how that question was phrased before I can answer.
Well, I mean, fair enough, but I know you guys deal with all kinds of businesses, other lawyers, sophisticated developers, all this kind of, we're just homeowners. And all we want to do is find out this information. And you have to be a quasi-detective to find the stuff on the Town of Canmore website, let me tell you. And you can't print any from any of the documents. So you have to copy them and paste them and then print them. So I fully hold my hands up and say I might not have asked the question with the right terminology. But there you have it. So if the burden of proof is on us, the burden should be on you to provide the evidence that or the data that allows us to provide that evidence. That's my only comment. It could be a lot easier, that's all. So if I use the wrong terminology, I put my hand up.
Christoph, do you have any questions for Ms. Bannerman? Okay. I've turned your mic off, but I'm not sure if you'll need it again. So Ms. Maroney, it's now an opportunity if you have any rebuttal evidence that you would like to provide.
Well, I'm not allowed to introduce anything new, so nope, I sign off. I'm done. Thanks.
And then a summary of your arguments. If you would like to add anything, you are up first, and then Ms. Bannerman will do her summary as well. So please go ahead if you have a summary that you'd like to provide.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I think I've said everything I need to say, and your time is precious. I appreciate. So I think I've stated my case.
Okay, thanks very much. Ms. Bannerman, do you have a summary?
I'll just briefly go through it. Just to reiterate the summary that I had before, we respectfully submit that the 2024 property assessment for the subject property is correct, fair, and equitable. All the legislative requirements through the MGA and matters relating to assessment and taxation regulation have been followed, and we do feel that the subject property is large. It does support redevelopment due to the fact that there's a nominal value on the improvement, and it likely would be subdivided and 2 single detached homes would be built on there. So in conclusion, we do feel that the evidence that we provided, that were sales of properties that were either vacant land or were likely to be redeveloped or had been redeveloped since the sale, that they do support the assessed value of the subject property, and we ask the board to confirm the assessment. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And Ms. Baroni, you do have an opportunity for the last word, if there's anything you'd like to add before we close out.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentations. Thank you for the questions. I know that they're very helpful for understanding all of the material that we have in front of us. At this time, I would like to ask both parties if they feel that they've been heard today and if they feel that they have received a fair hearing.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great. So I'll now declare the hearing closed. So no further evidence or submissions may be received from the board. The Municipal Government Act does require a written decision within 30 days and gives the clerk an additional 7 days to issue the decision. So we will make every effort as the board to meet or better those requirements, and the clerk will forward our decision to you at our earliest opportunity. So that will conclude the hearing, and thank you again for your time this morning.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Okay, we're going to take just a 5-minute recess, and then we will move on to the next hearing. Great. Good morning again. So welcome to this Canmore Local Assessment Review Board hearing. I'd like to remind everyone that the ARB hearings are open to the public, and this hearing will be recorded and streamed live, and then the video recording will be our record of the hearing. So we're here today to review the complaint and subsequent evidence as filed for tax roll number 10092. So the municipal address is 1005 10th Street in Canmore. So I'll start by introducing the panel, ask parties to introduce themselves, and then after that, I'll explain our standard hearing procedure again and ask for comments in that regard if there's any comments. So my name is Jen Marin. I'll be the presiding officer this morning, appointed to the panel, and the other panel members with me today are John Pedwell and Christoph Breyer. Does anyone have any objections to the panel as constituted? Okay, great. So I'm going to have the parties introduce themselves as well, so starting with the complainants. So if you could please state for the record your name, organization, and your role in the hearing, and indicate whether you are the owner of the property under complaint. And I will need you to just come up to the microphone for that so that we can hear it on the video.
Yes, my name is Mike Williams, and acting as a homeowner.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Williams. And to the respondent, please state for the record your name, organization, and your position with the municipality.
Sure. My name is Deanne Bannerman. I'm with Legacy Municipal Services, and I'm the appointed assessor for the town of Canmore.
Perfect. Thanks, Ms. Bannerman. So the same procedure that we followed for the first hearing, we will follow again. So the complainant will present their evidence first, followed by questions from the respondent and then the panel. Next, the respondent will present their evidence, followed once again by questions from the complainant, if there are any, and then the panel. The complainant will have an opportunity for rebuttal. And then finally, both parties will have an opportunity to present their final argument and summarize their evidence for the panel, with the complainant going first. If anyone needs a break, if any problems come up, just let us know as soon as possible, and we can address that as we go. And I'll also take the time to remind everyone to, again, turn off your cell phones if you have them. Are there any questions about that procedure that we're following this morning, or is everyone okay with how that was laid out? Good, okay. So both parties have exchanged disclosure evidence. We have that evidence. To save time, I'm going to propose again that we mark all the documents for the record now. If there are any questions about the admissibility, we can address those as we go and strike the material from the record later if necessary. So if everyone is comfortable with that, I will ask the clerk to read the evidence into the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for tax roll 10092. Complainant package marked C1 is the complaint form of 10 pages, and the respondent package marked R1 is the respondent disclosure of 55 pages.
Great, thanks very much, Lisa. Are there any preliminary issues for the panel to address? Okay, no preliminary issues. So we'll start the presentations. We will go, Mr. Williams, you will start. So we're ready to hear your evidence if you are set to go ahead. And again, please come up to the microphone. I think we can use this microphone for the evidence, and then when there's questions, we can use the other microphones. Perfect. Great.
Good morning, Madam Chair and fellow panel members. We're not arguing we can't fight City Hall. We know that. But there is just a little bit of interest in knowing exactly how you come up to the value of our home. We have been long-time property owners in Canmore and have seen the incremental values go up. But when we purchased this house 3 years ago, we, like everyone else, feel as we overpaid, and it just seemed to us that that there was a value put on the house at that time from the 21 assessments of 1.7 million, and then it went up to 2.38, and then it went up to 2.8, and now it's at 3.8. It's 133% since we purchased it. And it won't be long, and we'll have the most expensive house in Canmore. It just does not add up to us. Anyway, on page 12 of the respondents' declarations, it says that we have forced air and air conditioning and an elevator, which we do not. We do not have either of those. And other than that, I guess we just don't believe that the amount of taxes we're paying is correct. That's all I have to say.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. Bannerman, do you have any questions? Okay, and any questions from the board? Christoph, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. For how much did you purchase the home 3 years ago, please?
Oh, the purchase price was $3.1 million.
And that was,
September 22nd, 2022.
thank you.
We pressed that at the same time, Christoph. John, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. I do have one question, just on the evidence that you provided on the review board complaint. You've put in under the requested assessed value, you've put in the 3.851, which is what it was assessed at. Was that an error? I'm just not sure, because it aligns right now, like the requested value that you want assigned to it is what it was assessed at. So I'm just wondering if that was an error or what,
Yeah, I
what
think that
your.
would be an error.
Okay, and what was the requested assessed value then?
We're thinking $3.5 million.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay, Ms. Bannerman, to your evidence, please.
Okay. So today I'll be providing information to support the 2024 assessment for the property at 1005 10th Street, which is assessed at $3,851,000 for the 2025 taxation year. So the complainant's position is that the 33% increase is excessive, that average homes have only increased by about 10%, and that the broader housing indices show smaller growth. I will address each of these in turn while walking the board through our disclosure. So on page 3, the respondent will demonstrate to the board that under section 460 sub 9 of the Municipal Government Act, the onus is on the complainant to show that the assessed value is incorrect and to substantiate a requested value. The complainant has not provided any market evidence, only an opinion statement. We will also demonstrate that assessments must be prepared on an annual basis, that the valuation standard for the subject property is market value, and that assessments have been prepared in a fair and equitable manner in the town of Canmore. So now on pages 4 through 6, we show an exterior photograph of the subject property as well as aerial maps with their location. So on page 7, we're showing that the subject property is a high-quality residential detached home in Canmore's desirable downtown neighborhood. It was built in 2019, and it was purchased in February 2022, so that's when it transferred through Alberta Land Titles, for $3,620,000, which is the time-adjusted sale price to July 1st, 2024. And that it supports the assessment of $3,851,000, which is approximately 6% difference, although well accepted in a mass appraisal context. So on page 8, I'll just give some background to how property assessments are prepared in Alberta. Property assessments for the town of Canmore are prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Municipal Government Act and matters relating to assessment and taxation regulation. This legislation requires that assessments be prepared annually, that they reflect the market value as of July 1st, 2024, and that they must be based on mass appraisal, not on prior year's values or national indices. Market value means the amount that a property might be expected to realize if it is sold on the open market by a willing seller to a willing buyer. The legislation further stipulates that an assessment of property based on market value must be prepared using mass appraisal, must be the estimate of the fee simple estate in the property, and must reflect the typical conditions for properties similar to that property. Mass appraisal is the legislated methodology for valuing individual properties and involves the following process. Properties are stratified into groups of comparable properties. Common property characteristics are identified for the properties in each group, and a uniform valuation model is created for each property group. Property assessments for detached residential properties in the town of Canmore are determined using the market modified cost approach, and this approach is a hybrid of both the cost and the sales comparison approaches to value. Under this approach, all improvements are first valued based on the cost approach, and then the values are adjusted to reflect current market conditions based on sales transactions. This is the most appropriate method of valuation because it mirrors the actions of buyers and sellers in the marketplace, and there's sufficient sales to derive reliable market estimates. So now on page 12, we show the property information for the subject property. So the subject property is a good custom 3,284 square foot, two-story basementless home in the Lions Park neighborhood. This property is located within close proximity to the Bow River, which is considered a premium in the town of Canmore. And the complainant has raised questions on their property data, such as not having the presence of an elevator. And they did mention air conditioning, but we don't have air conditioning on the property regardless. So this is something that, because it wasn't raised prior to the hearing for the assessor to be able to address, is something that we're not able to provide any support or not regarding the presence of it. And without being able to confirm that or even what the value of having that removed would be, since that was a new issue that was brought forward, we can't really address that at this time. So now I'm on page 13. The complainant had a duty to disclose documentary evidence and any written argument by August 27, 2025. The notice of hearing, which was sent on July 31st, 2025, outlined these disclosure responsibilities. The only information that was provided by the complainant was the original complaint form, which is C1. Matters relating to assessment complaints regulation is clear. The board must not hear any evidence not disclosed within the legislative timelines, and we've provided several board decisions in support of these. So now the complainant raises the argument that their percent change from last year is excessive. However, an increase in the assessment from the previous year is not reason enough to demonstrate that an assessment is incorrect. This issue has been before several boards and courts. And specifically in the Tweedledale decision before the MGB, the board decided that an increase from the previous year does not mean that an assessment is incorrect. And a summary of these decisions can be found on pages 14 to 15. So on page 18, each property in a municipality must be prepared and assessed on an annual basis. This framework, again, has been tested by the boards and the courts with the decisions that can be found on pages 18 and 19. And I won't read them all since everyone has the information. In addition to bearing the onus to prove that an assessment is incorrect, the complainant also bears the burden of proof to demonstrate that the requested value is correct. The complainant has not provided a request assessed value supported by evidence, and as can be found on the complainant's C1, the requested assessed value provided by the complainant is the same as the current assessed value. There's been no evidence provided to demonstrate that a change in the assessed value is warranted. The complainant has a multi-step requirement to demonstrate this to the board, that a change in the assessment is necessary. They must first show that the assessment is incorrect, and second, convincingly prove that the requested value is correct. In the absence of both, boards have decided that a change in the assessment is unwarranted. So on page 21, and I just want to bring to your attention that both on page 21 and page 23, I have a typo on the charts that I provided. The assessment for the subject property should read $3,851,000, not $3,700,000, and I apologize for that. So there was one comparable that was provided on page 21 by the respondent, which is of similar quality in construction and finishes. It's to the subject property. It's a 2-story, no-basement home in the same neighborhood as the subject property. The major differences between the subject property and the comparable provided is that the comparable sits on a lot over 1,000 square foot smaller, and it is an older home that has undergone renovations rather than a new build. The comparable also is not located close to the Bow River, which, as mentioned prior, is considered a premium in the town of Canmore. So the subject property was purchased in February of 2022, as mentioned, with a time-adjusted sale price of $3,620,000. The comparable provided, as well as the sale of the subject property being within 6% of the assessed value, supports the subject's assessed value of $3,851,000. The land title document for the subject property, as well as the comparables, can be found on pages 31 to 35. So in contrast, on page 23, the complainant has provided comparables that are not similar to the subject property, relying instead on general statements. None of the properties provided by the complainant are in the same market location to the subject property. In addition, the property at 151 Rundle Crescent did not transfer through Alberta land titles within the valuation timeframe, with its last transfer date being in October of 2003, so it should not be considered. So the first 2 properties listed on the sheet that were provided by the complainant are both older log cabins and lower quality of construction and finishes than the subject property. They are also different structure types. The last property on the chart is for a property that is approximately 500 square foot smaller, in a different market location, and has a smaller lot size and is older. The only property that is in close proximity to the river that was on the list from the complainants was the property at 151 Rundle Crescent, which, as mentioned, did not sell. The major difference between this property, the subject property, and the 151 Rundle Crescent can be found on the chart provided, but specifically it is much older, has a much smaller lot size, and the house is significantly smaller than the subject property. Differences in the assessed values are attributable to the differences in the property characteristics, and the assessment information as well as land title transfer documents for these properties can be found on pages 36 to 48. So in summary, the complainant had a duty to disclose documentary evidence and any written argument by the deadline. The complainant was required to provide this disclosure to both parties, the Assessment Review Board and to the assessor. And the only information provided was what was on the original complaint form, and does not provide a requested assessment amount, nor support for any change in the current assessed value. As demonstrated, the onus to prove that an assessment is incorrect is the requirement of the complainant. The complainant has not provided a requested assessed value, nor demonstrated that the assessment is incorrect. So based on the evidence provided by the respondent, the assessor submits that the comparable properties provided by the complainant are not similar to the subject property. The assessor feels that the comparable sale provided to the board by the respondent, including the sale of the subject property, supports the assessed value and respectfully submits that the property assessment for the subject property be confirmed at $3,851,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Batterman. Mr. Williams, do you have any questions for Ms. Batterman?
No, as you can see, we're not throwing the book at you. We're just simply saying that, gee, that's a heck of an investment. Or it seems that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions for Ms. Bannerman? Go ahead, Christoph.
I have one question. On page 21, you're showing comparable sales, and you show only one comparable sale. Are there not more you can use?
This was the best one. So when we're looking at providing comparables, we're looking for properties that are in a similar location, similar quality of construction and finishes, similar structure type. Those are some of the main things that we're looking for. So that was the best comparable that we had, along with the sale of the subject property as well. So it's technically two.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams, you mentioned you think the more appropriate number is 3.5 million for your property. How did you generate that? I'm not clear. I think I know, but I want to be clear.
You could be very clear by me just saying that I'm looking for a wee bit of a deduction. I guess I look at it and I say, the value of the home is historically going up by leaps and bounds. And at some point, you've got to say, if I put it on the open market, what would I get? And our best guess is $3.5 billion. So that's how I've arrived at that.
So you did not get, say, an appraisal or anything like that? That's your gut reaction?
That's the wife and I.
Okay, fair enough.
Sure.
Okay, do you have, Mr. Williams, any rebuttal evidence that you would like to provide? No? Okay. Okay, so no questions. So we will go to summaries. So if there's anything you would like to summarize, Mr. Williams, you're up first, and then we will go to Ms. Bannerman.
No, you've heard from us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Bannerman.
I would just reiterate what I've summarized during my presentation, so as not to be overly repetitive, but just being that, the complainant just mentioned that, his property's gone up over and over and over again, and that is such the market in Canmore over the last few years. It has gone up exponentially more than probably most other municipalities in the province. So with regards to it being a good investment, I would say likely you're correct, as it doesn't seem that the market is slowing. We have no indicators that the market is slowing down at this point. So if that's any kind of good news for you from where you are. And the other thing I just wanted to mention too, which we can talk after the hearing, but with regards to the air conditioning, or the property details, what we can do is contact you next week and just make sure that we have the property details correct for next year's assessment as well.
Great, thanks, Ms. Bannerman. And Mr. Williams, you do have an opportunity for last word if you would like to say anything else.
No last word.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for the presentations. Thank you for sharing all of your information. I would like to just at this time ask both parties if they feel that they've been heard today and if they feel that they've received a fair hearing. Yes, okay. So I'll declare this hearing closed. No further evidence or submissions may be received by the board. As you heard from the last hearing, the Municipal Government Act requires a written decision within 30 days and gives the clerk an additional 7 days to issue the decision. So as the board, we will make every effort to meet or better those requirements, and the clerk will forward our decision to you at her earliest opportunity. So thank you again for your time this morning. And if you want to chat after the hearing about those follow-up details, you're absolutely welcome to do that. Okay, thank you. Good morning. Again, and go ahead, Lisa. Yeah, good. Okay. And welcome, Mr. Caldwell, to this hearing as well. So welcome to everyone for the Canmore Local Assessment Review Board hearing. I would like to remind everyone that the ARB hearings are open to the public and that this hearing it will be recorded and streamed live. So we don't have the screen down, but it is streaming, and the video recording will be our record of hearing. So we're here today to review the complaint and subsequent evidence as filed for tax roll number 17496, and the municipal address is 113 Deergus Gate. So I'll start by introducing the panel and then ask the parties to introduce themselves. After that, I'll explain our standard hearing procedure and ask for comments in that regard. So my name is Jen Marin. I'll be the presiding officer appointed to the panel this morning. The other panel members with me today are John Pedwell and Christoph Breyer. Does anyone have any objection to the panel as constituted? No? Okay, great. So I'm going to have the parties introduce themselves. So starting with the complainant. So Mr. Caldwell, will you please state your name for the record, your organization, and your role in this hearing, and please indicate whether you are the owner of the property under complaint. And I'll just need you to come to the microphone. Yeah, just so it's recorded on the video, otherwise it won't pick it up.
So, yes, my name's Charles Raymond Caldwell. As the lady kindly corrected, I've always been called by my second name. I am the owner of the property which was constructed in 2003, but it's been let due to my emigrating to Canada, unfortunately being prevented due to family health issues. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And to the respondents, Ms. Bannerman, if you could please state your name for the record, your organization, and your position with the municipality.
Sure, I'm Deanne Bannerman. I'm with Legacy Municipal Services, and I'm the appointed assessor for the town of Canmore.
Great, thank you very much. So the standard practice for the hearing is to have the complainant present all of their evidence first, followed by questions from the respondent and then from the panel. Next, the respondent will provide their evidence, followed once again by questions from the complainant and then the panel. The complainant will have an opportunity for a rebuttal. And finally, both parties will have an opportunity to present their final argument and summarize their evidence for the panel, and the complainant will present that summary first. If anyone needs a break or if there's any problems as we go, please let the panel know as soon as possible and we can address those. I'll also mention if we're still going at noon and it looks like we'll be continuing for a longer time, we'll probably break for lunch as well. So we'll just see how it goes over the next hour and a half or so. I'll also take this time to remind everyone to please turn off any mobile devices. Are there any questions regarding the procedure today, or is everyone okay with the process as it was laid out? Good, okay, great. So both parties exchanged disclosure evidence before the hearing. Just to save time, I'm going to propose that we mark all the documents for the record now. It won't stop anyone from raising questions about admissibility later. If there are any questions that come up, we will deal with them and strike material from the record later if necessary. So if everyone is comfortable with this procedure, I will ask the clerk to read the documents into evidence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For tax roll 17496, we have complainant package marked C1. It's the complaint form of 1 page. Complainant package marked C2 is the complainant disclosure of 29 pages. And complainant package C3 is the complainant rebuttal of 13 pages. And the respondent package marked R1 is respondent disclosure of 60 pages.
Great, thanks very much, Lisa. Are there any preliminary issues for the panel to discuss before we move forward? No? Okay, great. So we're going to start the presentations. Mr. Caldwell, you'll go first. So we're ready to hear your evidence if you're set to go ahead. And again, you'll just have to come up to the microphone for that.
Good morning, Madam Chair and panel. I'm here not wishing to be in conflict with the town of Canmore at all. in the last 22 years, I've not had any issues. The situation has varied in 2025, as I've tried to outline. The crux of the assessment practice, and as mandated by the specific provisions of the Alberta legislation, I'm concerned with regards to how that's being compliantly undertaken, as any assessment that contravenes the specific provisions would be unlawful. In this regard, the assessment has to evaluate any subject property on two specific key dates, July 1st, 24 in this instance, and December 31st, 24. I'm familiar with the mass appraisal approach, and I perhaps should say my career in the last 34 years has been providing expert witness for dispute resolution on behalf of the courts, in addition to my other work. So there's a motto, was do what is right, come what may, which is how I have always undertaken my work. So the mass appraisal basis has to be to the best appraisal standards, and the appraisal must incorporate open market sales data between willing buyers and sellers in the marketplace. Once again, a failure to compliantly undertake this would be unlawful. And then the third aspect is any data from any comparables must be adjusted to reflect the discrepancies between the property types and the location, and any other differences in characteristics as at the second relevant date of December 31st, 24. So turning to these in a little bit more detail, the subject property is 113 Dozos Gate. It's remained unaltered, and it's literally in as-built interior condition since 2003. With my home where I am, I had a house with my work for many years, but I'm not one known to alter things. If I like how they are, that's how it remains. And I can see how splendid some of the houses are now, and I probably do need to do some renovations, but everyone seemed to be very happy up to there. So, but I think a realtor came round who'd sold the house, the lot to me, and couldn't get over how it was in a time warp the other day. So that was, which I didn't take it as an insult, but it's, I'd love to have had granite worktops, etc. So what has altered this year, unfortunately, has been this scheme for the bus stop. And whilst the bus stop wasn't in operation, the initial stages of the work resulted in adjacent parking on the road being removed for the occupants and visitors to 113A. As I say, I'm unfortunately residing 4,500 miles away, but they were quite excited about this, especially because it is a downward grade driveway with pretty limited parking compared to some of the neighbouring properties. So basically, in the early summer of 24, the scheme was publicly announced, although it had been in the pipeline, you can see from the drawings, since 2023. Basically, irrespective of insurance problems for when the bus stops in operation, the key thing has been the alteration to both available parking, because it's amazing how many cars park on the other side of the road for visiting other properties. This unit, as you see, has basically two households, and for the basement suite, unfortunately the garage is of a dimension which, with most sizable vehicles, it's pretty prevalent now, means that they have to park on the drive and utilise the other roadside parking because they've had two cars there. So it's not overabundant with parking, so the loss of that is particularly more important. And with the downward grade and the alterations with the snowplow regime, leaving to, unfortunately, because I was concerned about this at the time, a wider sweep. As I say, I don't reside there, but they say it's extremely hazardous getting in and out compared with how it's been since the property was constructed. So basically, the respondent kindly provided me with the detailed property report in April this year. Compared with my professional work and experience, it didn't seem to be over-detailed, but obviously you have a lot of properties to assess. And I may add, when I started my career, I worked for HMRC, the government body, undertaking property assessments and for commercial and residential. So there is a contrast in the amount of detail, but that's by the way. From examining it, though, it doesn't look as though it's been revised since 2003 when the property was new. So it has failed to make any account or reference, let alone discount any effects of the bus stop scheme and the change in the material detrimental characteristics which have sadly become prevalent during this 2024 period. The new impediments are clear to see upon visiting the site. So for the subject property, if a site inspection had occurred at December 31st, it would have been a stark contrast to before. So I would have expected there to have been an entry, one way or another, recording this, because it is a material characteristic change. So basically, that has remained unaltered since 2003. So in the absence of any evidence factoring matters at the subject property as to the alteration of the characteristics, this would call into doubt compliance with the second relevant valuation assessment date. Turning on to the mass appraisal and open market values and the requirement to undertake things to best appraisal standards, the respondent has cited 4 open market sales. Only one is actually at Deergast Gate. The other 3 are at distinctly different neighbourhoods. On a plan, it may look a lot further apart, but they're distinctly different, and which is, it's a fact that if those are the sales, so be it. But the key then comes to how you make the adjustments. But I'll come on to that later on. The respondent has cited the comparison and assured the ARB board that the open market sales between July 1st, 21 and June 30th, 24 have been taken into account with the process. And it stresses several times that the best appraisal standards and that fairness are vital attributes in this process. The Alberta legislation stresses the significance of incorporating all sales in the assessment process, and the respondent submission on September 11th again reiterates what I was told in April, that this has been the case. And now, I should say, I'm not here very often. I live 4,500 miles away, but sadly, in assessing the validity of this claim to the ARB earlier this month, I've discovered it to be incorrect. The respondent has full access to all the sales transactions, basically totally unlike myself here, and there's been the exclusion of an open market sale despite what the respondent has stated to be the case to the ARB in the submission on September 11th. The validity of the respondent's claim is therefore disproven and rebuffed by the fact that 112 Deergast Gate, which is opposite, was in fact sold in 2024 and appears to be completely absent from anything. And it's in regard to the fact that the open market sales are stressed to have been incorporated that I'm pointing this out in the rebuttal. I'm not talking about the values reflecting it, but it's the principle and the requirements under the mass appraisal for situations between a willing seller and a willing buyer to be taken into account. This is located directly opposite single-family home and constructed at the same time, which would have equated to there being 2 comparables which should have been taken into account. However, by not utilising this, or indeed there being any evidence that it was assessed or taken into account or adjusted or discounted, it actually undermines the compliance with the Alberta legislation. And in my experience in court, that would be deemed to be ultra vires and an unlawful assessment process. The principle of omitting sales is very serious, and it basically discredits the standards being applied. And obviously the town haven't undertaken this themselves, but it's something that isn't reflective of this conduct that you would normally anticipate. So irrespective of the bus scheme, which I've said doesn't seem to have been taken into account in the first case for the December 31st assessment date, the fact that the open market sales evidence seems to have been arbitrarily and selectively used is extremely concerning. It should have been included. The fact that it hasn't, and that the other comparables aren't all in the same neighbourhood, I think is very concerning, and the legitimacy of the assessment process is basically eradicated. The final point comes down to what adjustments, because of course no 2 properties are ever the same. Life would be a lot easier for an assessor valuer if they were, but we've got a situation whereby we're bereft of market data, and when it does come along, then obviously you have to hope that they're between, it's a balanced playing field between willing buyers and sellers, and it's not an exceptional situation. We've got, with regards to the neighbourhoods, as I've said, the matters of adjustment become of more significance when the neighbourhoods are different. For example, I keep getting the names of these wrong, but Misco, is it Misco Place, I suppose, it's close? The Misco one, I've always considered to be an extremely nice neighbourhood and is very desirable. So it's flattering to be associated with that, but it is sadly radically different. Equally, with regards to any of the adjustments, we've got none of the comparables have a bus stop scheme, and the alterations to parking and things which alter the status quo for the subject property at the second date of December 31st. Throughout what I've been provided with, including the September 11th kind submission from the respondent, there is no evidence or details as to how the comparables have been adjusted to the scenario at the subject property at 113. In addition, there is no evidence of any account that the scheme which occurred on December 31st has been also additionally taken into account when applying the comparable values to the subject property. The issues with regards to comparables, taking the respondents' assessments for 25, is that the equation between the concealed and omitted open market sale issue at 112 Durgars Gate, directly opposite, has been assessed as being circa 200,000 more valuable than the subject property. So if there is that correlation in closeness and value, you would have thought that the sale of that property would have been of direct relevance. And yes, there are discrepancies with regards to size and type, but the thing is, it's in the same neighbourhood, it's a single family home, and it's, I think the fact that it's the same age, and it has actually subsequently been affected, albeit opposite, of the bus stop scheme, But I think one of the comments has been that parking has been eradicated for 113A, can use the other side of the road. That's frequently very full from what I'm advised. So I'm just concerned that the adjustments for properties which are not at the same site, not affected by a scheme, have been correctly altered, because there doesn't seem to be any evidence of any sort of before and after valuation, which would be the norm for before and after a scheme to assess what the impact is. You would normally do that exercise even if it was something I didn't want to hear and you thought that there'd been no effect or something like that, which would have been jolly nice, there'd been no effect. But if that was the case, you'd normally have a detailed reasoning as to why certain things have been disregarded or ironed out of the equation. But we haven't had that. Basically, there's been, I see from the respondent's submission, they tried to have the appeal dismissed on legal grounds, and yet it's the respondent that has violated the legislation in the first instance, because in the failure to undertake the valuation and assess matters that were prevalent in terms of the altered characteristics from the long-standing status quo of the subject property at December 31st, 24, and then the omission of open market data. There's not even an entry on the comparables, because everything needs to be adjusted to take into account things, but it's not entered at all, and that is of direct relevance. Because sadly, as I say, I'm not arguing regarding the values that were applied, because the value for 113, now that I've discovered this since I've arrived here, would have been a lot less using the data from 112. However, it's the principle that the mass appraisal process has been violated and it hasn't been included that concerns me in terms of correct procedures. And that's the basis upon which I've challenged matters, because the lack of correlation now that exists between properties in that same street at Durgas Gate has never occurred like it is prevalent on the 25 assessment basis. But thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry, my eyesight seems to be going a bit, so I'm sort of finding everything a little bit blurred, but thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Ms. Bannerman, do you have any questions? No. Okay. Does the panel have any questions?
Yeah, just one quick one. I think I missed it. Which sales comparable are you saying is missing?
If you just come up, sorry, Mr. Yeah, sorry, just so it's on record.
I've got a plan, if it helps. I'm sorry, if I hadn't been on an aircraft, I would have sent the plans. May I come to just point out where it is? Yeah. So that's the subject property 113.
Yeah.
And then that's 113, the subject property, and this one here was sold in 2023.
And that's number?
112.
112.
112 Durgas. Okay.
Are there any more questions from the panel? No? Okay. Ms. Bannerman, so we are ready to hear your evidence, if you're set to present that to us.
All right, so I'm here today to present to the board the information to support the assessed value of $2,157,000 for the property located at 113 Durgas Gate. The respondent disclosure outlines both the methodology used and the supporting market evidence. My presentation today follows the order that the disclosure document falls in and provides references to the relevant page numbers for the board's ease of review. So on page 3, we have listed the main response issues from the respondent to demonstrate that the assessment Complainant has not met the evidentiary burden of proof under Section 460 sub 9 of the Municipal Government Act to demonstrate how the assessment of $2,157,000 is incorrect. We will also demonstrate that the assessment was prepared in accordance with Alberta legislation, that assessments must be prepared on an annual basis, and that the assessor must prepare assessments in a fair and equitable manner. So now on pages 4 to 6, we have an exterior photograph of the subject property as well as aerial maps. So you can see in the location within its neighborhood. On page 7, the subject property is a detached residential property located in the Dergus neighborhood, a mature and desirable area of Canmore. It was constructed in 2003, zoned R1BW, and has not undergone any recorded renovations or structural updates since that time, according to our records. The property includes a 3-car garage and a private driveway, and is situated on a typical lot for this neighborhood. So now on page 8, so just to give a little bit of background just to property assessments in Alberta. Property assessments for the town of Canmore are prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Municipal Government Act and the matters relating to assessment and taxation regulation. Alberta legislation prescribes that property assessments must be prepared based on market value. And this means the amount that a property might be expected to realize if it is sold on the open market by a willing seller to a willing buyer. Property assessments for the 2024 assessment year must be an estimated value of the property as of July 1st, 2024, which is our valuation date, and to reflect the physical condition of the property on December 31st, 2024, which is the condition date. The legislation further stipulates that an assessment of property based on market value must be prepared using mass appraisal, must be an estimate of the value of the fee simple estate in the property, and must reflect typical market conditions for properties similar to that property. Mass appraisal is the legislated methodology used for valuing properties and involves the following process. Properties are stratified into groups of comparable properties. The common property characteristics are identified for the properties in each group, and then a uniform model is created for each property group and then applied back to that group. So for the detached residential properties, we use the market modified cost approach, which combines the depreciated replacement cost of the structure with the market value of the land, adjusted to reflect the actual market conditions through market calibration to the time period of July 1st, 2024. So now I'm on page 12. So turning to the subject property itself, the assessment of $2,157,000 was determined by applying this market modified cost approach. The subject property is a good custom home in the Cassell market area, which encompasses Cassell, Dergus Gate, and Miscow Close. It is a 2,479 square foot, 2-story home built in 2003. Of note, there are no permits or records of renovations or improvements to the subject property since its construction in 2003, so it is being treated as a true 2003 property and compared to those as well. It is assessed equitably with other homes of similar quality and vintage. There have been no issues raised with regards to the physical characteristics of the home. So now I'm going to jump to page 23. So the bottom of 23. So the complainant's core argument is that the installation of a new bus stop in May of 2024 in front of the property has negatively impacted its value due to the loss of on-street parking, et cetera. While I understand the homeowner's concerns, I must emphasize 3 key points. The complainant has provided no objective market data, no comparable sales, no listing data, and no third-party appraisals to demonstrate that there is a decline in the market value for his property. Under Section 460 sub 7 of the MGA, the complainant must demonstrate that the current assessment is incorrect, explain how it is correct or incorrect, and provide evidence of what the correct value is. The courts and boards have consistently ruled that personal opinion, even when sincere, does not meet this legal burden. We've included numerous decisions on pages 19 to 23 to support this. So the subject property still has functional on-site parking. We've shown a photo of the subject property on the bottom of page 23, which we took this summer. And then on the top of page 24, which shows the bus stop that was put in front of the house, since there was no photo evidence that was provided in the complainant's information just while it was under construction. So despite the complainant's suggestion of lost utility, the subject maintains private on-site parking for 6 vehicles via a driveway and a garage. While the bus stop may reduce immediate curbside access, it does not negate the property's parking functionality, and there remains ample visitor parking across the street, which meets the standards of reasonableness in a residential context. So now onto page 26. So in validating the assessment, we relied on 3 comparable sales of the same construction and finish quality. They're all 2-story homes with basements within the same neighborhood grouping. From this information, you can see that they are very similar in size, age, and lot size. So the assessments that are prepared for the town of Canmore are prepared in compliance with the legislation. So when we're preparing assessments, we are required to use all valid sales in the preparation of assessments. However, when we're responding to a complainant's evidence, we have the ability to choose the best comparables to support that property's assessment. In the case of the property at 112 Durgis Gate, this property was not used as a comparable by the respondent. It was raised as a comparable by the respondent in his rebuttal, not his original disclosure. But the reason that the respondent did not use it in their comparison is because it's a bungalow, not a 2-story with basement property. So we felt we had enough sales of similar properties to the subject that would not be required. There's all sorts of issues when you bring in a 2-story versus a bungalow, just in the fact that you've got main floor area and then you've got above grade area. Oftentimes the bungalows have a larger footprint, so that means the basements are larger. So we find it just much simpler to keep things the same as much as possible, as much as properties are the same in Canmore. And so then on page 27, as mentioned, when valuing properties, we use the larger market area. So you can see in the image there how close in proximity the comparables that the respondents provided is. It would be very unlikely that if we were to just stay with the sales on Durgis Gate, that there would be enough sales for mass appraisal to even prepare the assessments, which is why we go to larger market areas, which do perform very similarly. And then just back to my comparable chart. So just to also highlight, the property at 107 Durgis Gate was also used by the complainant. And this property is slightly larger, almost 300 square feet larger, but has a smaller lot size by about just under 3,000 square feet, which is what some of the differences are between those two properties. So more details on those properties provided by the respondent can be found on pages 40 to 49 of our disclosure. And we do feel that the assessment of the subject property is supported by these comparables. And in contrast, on page 28, from the comparables provided by the complainant, only the property at 107 Durgis Gate sold within the valuation period. The property at 108 Durgis Gate is also a lower quality of construction and finishes to the subject property, so it shouldn't be considered as comparable. And then the other properties listed all support the assessment of the subject property given the differences between them. And additional information on these property characteristics can be found on pages 50 to 53. We do not see any market information from the complainant that supports a $200,000 reduction in their assessed value. That would represent almost a 10% drop in value, and that type of decrease is typically only observed for properties facing extreme encumbrances. So with regards to the bus stop attribute, we've analyzed, and this is typical for Canmore as it is for other municipalities in Alberta, but that bus stops have a nominal effect on value. So if you have a bus stop in front of your property, looking at sales and analyzing sales shows that it really doesn't decrease the value of the subject property. So in summary, the subject property located at 113 Durgas Gate in Canmore has been assessed for $2,157,000. We do feel that this assessment was prepared in accordance with the requirements of the legislation, and that the legislation requires municipalities to prepare assessments on an annual basis that reflect the market values of July 1st, 2024. So effective year built adjustments were also considered to account for renovations and additions. However, there is no record of the subject property having any such improvements or renovations. The subject property's assessed value was determined using mass appraisal principles, and its accuracy was validated against comparable sales of similar two-story homes with basements of comparable quality in the same neighborhood. These sales confirmed the subject's assessment is consistent with market evidence and equitable with other properties. The complainant referenced the installation of a new bus stop in front of his property. However, no market evidence was provided to demonstrate that this has negatively impacted value. The subject property is improved, as mentioned, with a 3-car garage and private driveway, and additional parking is available across the street. Without market evidence or comparable sales to support this claim, there is no basis to reduce the assessment. It is important to emphasize that under 460 sub 7 of the MGA, the burden of proof lies with the complainant to show not only that the current assessment is incorrect, but also provide convincing evidence of what the correct value should be. This is not the role of the respondent, but it is the role of the complainant. The respondent's role is to respond to the evidence that's been provided. The complainant has not met the burden of proof. There's no justification to deviate from mass appraisal process or to consider any kind of injurious affection in this context. The assessor submits that the assessment was prepared in full compliance with the governing legislation, mass appraisal standards, and appraisal best practice, and that the respondent's comparable sales support the value. The complainant has failed to provide any evidence that would warrant a reduction, and for these reasons, the assessor respectfully requests that the Assessment Review Board confirm the assessment at $2,157,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bannerman. Mr. Coldwell, do you have any questions about the evidence that was just provided?
If I may just ask,
I'll need
clarifying.
Yeah, of course, yeah, and we can actually use, if you want to use that microphone, that might be easier.
Then we don't have to switch back.
And then you can look at each other. Yeah, so please go ahead, yeah, perfect.
So this is not the rebuttal, but so what I just wanted to, for my own education.
And you'll have a chance to do rebuttal after, so just questions
yes.
now
So-
on the
so
evidence,
just-
and then we'll go to
you
rebuttal.
referred
Yeah.
to 112 being a bungalow.
Yes.
Where I come from, a bungalow is a single-story
Yes.
building.
Yes.
But that's a 2-story building at 112?
It's got a portion, so it looks like it would be 2, but their basement is actually elevated on the side. So that bottom portion of their house is considered basement area because it's below grade in the back.
I wouldn't classify it, well, years ago, because the late wife of the then owner, who was English, and I used to go and stay there, and it's a single level at the bottom with an upper story.
Except for the bottom portion, that bottom level has some portion of it that's below grade. So on your street, they're across the street, they've got the mountain behind them.
Yes.
Whereas yours, you have the basement under, like, that's open, right? Because
Yes.
they have, their garage is actually, would be part of their basement area because the back portion is below grade. And that's very typical in Canmore with the
You can walk all
mountains.
the way around the back. It's not, the property isn't below that. Anyway, that's why, so it's definition of that was interesting. And I did have another question, but it can wait. Thank you very much, Steve. Sorry, thank you.
Sure.
Great, thank you. Does the board have any questions for Ms. Bannerman? Christophe, go ahead.
I have a question about your comparables. Are
Sure.
those all 2-story with basement?
They are all 2-story with basement homes, yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. That was all.
John, do you have any questions?
Sorry, I'm not getting the 112 Durgas. I'm not quite understanding what you're saying. Can you
Sure.
just Is it like a walkout basement only at the front instead of the
Yes.
back?
Yes, that's what it is. So
Because it's
portion,
built into the hillside.
yeah, so you have that where you have on one side, you'll have the walkout basements. The other side, the garage is going to be part of the basement, walkout kind of
Okay,
level,
got
yeah.
it now. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the panel? Okay, so thank you very much, Ms. Bannerman. We are going to move on now to the complainant's rebuttal evidence. So Mr. Caldwell, you can use this microphone for that to present. Yeah, you bet. I know, it's kind of all over the place. So whenever you're ready, please go ahead with your rebuttal evidence.
Thank you very much indeed. So basically, I would refute entirely the fact that I have given no evidence, because the basis that as I've stressed, that I'm concerned about is that in the assessment for 113 Durgas Gate, this review period, there is ample evidence that the respondent, in undertaking the assessment, did not comply with, number one, the December 31st date for the altered characteristics, and secondly, with regards to the correct use of comparables, because there's nothing in the records, I've heard what's just been said, but there's nothing in the records that 112 was taken into account at all. At best, I think there have been oversights in respect of not being au fait and aware of the changes on site outside 113 Durgas Gate due to the scheme. The fact that the town of Camel wrote to me about the works was because it was going to affect the property. And I was also advised that an injurious affection claim could subsequently go in once the scheme had been completed. So that, to me, and as would be expected, would suggest a detrimental effect from a scheme, so that to just be somewhat dismissive and say, well, it doesn't affect the property, doesn't quite run true with how throughout there has been this concern of minimising the impact, and indeed this last month or two, as I've seen today, there have been some planting works done. So clearly there was viewed by the town that the works were going to have an impact on the property. With regards to the fact that the respondent is arguing that I provided no evidence, well, in all due respect and courteously speaking, I don't think any evidence has been given by the respondent that the assessment process for 2025 has differed at all from 2003 to 2023, and yet there is a scheme in place and there's been open market evidence of a directly comparable property on the same street in a very precise neighbourhood, not the wider one that's been cited of 3 different districts. And clearly there is an association, because the way the respondent has assessed 112, which has failed to be referenced as open market data, has been valued just over $200,000 greater than 113. So clearly that sale is of significance. So why was it excluded? Because it's a fact that it was excluded. It's said that it was taken into account. There's been nothing in the evidence to uphold that. Clearly, the size of the properties, and I understand this is a peculiarity of how things are done, that the basement size for the subject property is not included. So overall, it's 3,500 so square feet. With regards to the parking issue, but I can't stress the loss of parking in this change to the snow ploughing arrangement is very significant for the people who live there, because there are 2 households. There's not just one with a requirement now and again for visitors to use the off-road parking. There's a very limited area in front. As I said, one of the garages isn't really accessible, and no one else has been affected like that. So the situation has changed, and as I say, that's failed to be recorded in the detailed property report. So that nothing has been recorded about physical characteristic alterations. The assessment has failed to take into account directly comparable evidence, literally feet across the road. We have a situation whereby the failure for the December 31st and the open market sales are both ultra vires matters which render the assessment process to be illegitimate. With regards to the best practices, etc., there's been no evidence as to how the comparables that have been cited have been applied. There's nothing to suggest that the adjustments and the process has been correct. In much the same way that, sadly, there's been the oversights with regards to the second assessment valuation criteria being taken into account and the full open market data. We've identified those, but we have no idea as to whether the adjustments have been made correctly, especially now that there is the third dimension of a bus stop scheme. So that they're not only the same locality, they're different buildings, but there's now a scheme to take into account. There's nothing has been presented to uphold that. So that prima facie, the assessment that has been applied has been unlawfully undertaken because of the criteria that have been identified, and as such, any reliance on that valuation would equally be ultra vires. So that is the point that has been made, and it's been proved that there have been these omissions, and it is considered, as I've said in the summary, if you look at the sale data for the property that has been excluded, the $200,000 allowance is extremely reasonable. Whilst it's very flattering to be assessed at being only $200,000 adrift from the other one, they're light years apart. And I fear that this selective use of data is basically not transparent. It is certainly not reflective of a fair assessment, but it violates the Alberta legislation code. So, with regards to the bungalow, as 112 is termed, it should be a very elaborate bungalow, which I understand has just been sold for 3-point-something million. They've spent a lot of money on doing renovations. But at the time of this assessment, I would stress that the respondent clearly viewed the property to be very closely linked in value at $200,000 adrift. So to exclude that sale data calls into question as to why would you exclude that sales data? Why would you not list on the valuation, detailed valuation report for the property that being the bus stop scheme? The reason for these is because they weren't compliant reassessment processes undertaken, and that it was an offence. So whilst it said that everything has been done with regards to the correct code, basically, as on page 3 of the respondent's evidence, it says valuation standard for third rate is market value and must prepare assessments in a fair and equitable manner. Well, I would say to the board that I don't think that excluding the scheme and excluding the market evidence that they are possessed, which no other third party would have access to, for a sale that I wasn't aware of 112 opposite, is not reflective of fair and equitable processes. Also, it's stated that on page 8 by the respondent, partway down, that the legislation stipulates that it must reflect typical market conditions for properties similar to that property. Well, in all due respect, whilst the respondent criticises me for producing no market data for properties affected by a bus stop, I would say that none of the comparables, and there's nothing in the assessment process that I've been able to see whereby the respondent has applied any market data of that type. So it's a bit of an unfortunate issue. Basically, and it's also stated about adjustments on page 10 being made to known sales. Again, everything is silent as to how these adjustments are. Normally, I'd expect to see a detailed and reasoned assessment process, because in the High Court, you cannot just state a figure and say, this is what we've got from comparables. You've got to show a reasoned stream of thought whereby you can answer any query as to how a distinctly different property has been made and used for altering and determining a value at a third-party property. There's nothing in this that shows any sort of reasoned or justifiable use of data. It's just merely stated there were these sales without anything else, which is unfortunate. So I don't think that assists us in understanding matters or indeed being able to justify that there hasn't been another serious error in that respect. Quite rightly, on page 20, the respondent states that there are often, respondent states a case where it says that there are often types of property that are different because of proximity to traffic, etc. As I've stated in the thing, 3 of the cited comparables do not have any through traffic at all, whereas Durgis Gate does. In addition, none of the comparables have the severe grade which makes access to the basement suite, sadly, at 113, which I will admit I was not, I hadn't considered it was going to be such a problem, but it really restricts the letting of that to anyone who's not able to do stairs, because it's quite a steep concrete path. Whereas a lot of these other ones have more level basement suites, which are more easily accessible. Basically, as I say, the parking aspect, unless you actually live there, and you've got to remember there are 2 households there, not just one, and for the basement, if they got 2 cars, one of those is on the road. The grade now is impeded even greater with the wider snow plough margin which has occurred. Also, I noted that the respondent states that basically, not that it's in the report, but stated just on the verbal submission just now, that they've taken into account bus stops, the residential places elsewhere, and it doesn't affect value. That's just a bland statement. Where is the evidence of that? What is the proof of that? Because clearly the town of Canmore considered that this was of effect for the property by writing to be in the first instance. And how many of these other schemes have because this is quite exceptional. Normally you put a bus shelter and stuff on the sidewalk. Here they've built out into the road, and that's what's taken away the parking for 113A. And I question how many other places that were being referenced there have had the same type of scheme. With regards to on page 24, the respondent quite correctly says, the assessment must reflect market value. Well, we've seen an omission of matters which were clear open market data. Equally, it's agreed, and I meant to stress this before, that with regards to other years' assessments, etc., they're not the starting point or base. What I pointed out how, though, at Durgis Gate, suddenly there's a lack of correlation. The values for the last 23 years have been closely ratioed between the various properties at Durgis Gate. Suddenly the subject property is out of kilter with that. And it doesn't seem to make sense how a property that's not been afflicted by the scheme has gone down in value more than the subject property. It seems to be that an exercise here has been done on the desktop without visiting the site or being aware of this scheme. And I think that is why in all the data, there's not one mention of the scheme at all. What you would expect is it to be mentioned, and then there'd be a reasoning as to how it's been taken into account for the current assessment. And then that would have covered that point off. And similarly, with 112 Durgis Gate, you'd expect to see that. But the fact that the open market sales data has been omitted, and the fact that there's no mention at all on the detailed property report of a scheme, means that the December 31st assessment failed to be undertaken. So the 2 counts whereby the legislation requirements for the assessment have been failed. So I have given evidence as to why the assessment issue is incorrect, and it centres on the fact that there's been a failure, and I think this failure has occurred because before, everything has remained the same year in, year out, and this year is the exception, and that's failed to be picked up on. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coldwell. Ms. Bannerman, do you have any questions for the rebuttal, or based on the rebuttal evidence? Yes, I do. Okay.
Do I stay there? Right. You go there. Yes.
So you've mentioned the injurious affection and the letter. The only letter that I was able to find in your, from the town in your disclosure was under Appendix 1 in C2?
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that just is a letter informing the property owner as to the bus stop going there, but there's no mention of any kind of welcoming conversation regarding injurious affection.
There was a lot of other correspondence, but as you rightly said in your thing, we're not here talking about the injurious affection, but it was specifically stated, and equally there have been matters altered trying to limit the impact by the positioning of the bins, etc. So there's been a lot of discussion, and Trevor Reeder brought up the injurious affection matter with me.
Sure, but you didn't actually include that in your
No, because we weren't here talking about injurious affection.
Okay, no, it's just you've raised it a few times, so I
Yes.
just wanted to make sure
Yes.
that the board was
But
aware as well.
but basically, much the same way it was written to in the first place, as you rightly said, it wasn't taking the property, but it was affecting the characteristic outside. I wish it hadn't, and I wish I wasn't here having to have this argument, but it really has affected matters for the people living there. And
Sure.
yes.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Yes, go ahead, John.
Yeah, two questions, one for the complainant, one for the respondent. Mr. Caldwell, you talk a lot about 112 Durgas. Is it in your package, or am I completely missing it?
It's the rebuttal to the fact that it said that the open market sales evidence on September 11th submission by the respondent, it stated that the open market sales between July 1st, 2021 and June 30th, 24 had been included and taken into account. And then I've discovered that, because I don't live here, I don't have but the house opposite me was sold in 2023 during this reference period, and that hasn't been cited.
Okay, so it's not in your package?
No, but it's the fact that there's a requirement taken out of
Yeah.
open market sales.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll get to that in just a second, if I can ask the respondent a question. Two questions now. Mr. Caldwell's gone on quite a bit about the bus stop outside. So on the physical condition at December 31st, did the assessor take that into account and made whatever adjustments she deemed appropriate?
So we are aware that the bus stop is there. However, through the analysis that we've done, and this is typical, as I mentioned, in most municipalities in the province, the presence of a bus stop in front of your property, 'cause it's not your property, it's in front of your property, it doesn't have an impact, or it's a negligible, if anything. And when we do
So-
negligible, we're using mass appraisals, so unless it actually creates an actual impact to the market value, we wouldn't include it.
So if I'm to understand this correctly, your data from Canmore suggests that it might be 1,000, might be 5, whatever.
Yeah.
A small negative adjustment, but not in the
Not in
neighborhood
the
of 10%,
Yeah, not in the 200.
based on the data that you've got.
Yeah, and based on the analysis that we do of all the, like we're looking at traffic, collector roads, if you're backing onto the highway, if you're backing onto the creek for positive, or onto
Yeah,
the river, we're
okay.
looking at all of those different attributes, backing onto commercial properties, those kinds of things. And so for the presence of bus stop, like I mentioned, it's such a small amount, even though it may be a negative amount, it's such a small amount
Yeah.
that in the mass appraisal, it would be just, like you'd be talking about $1 in taxes. So
Okay,
we don't
no.
go that fine.
No,
down
I
micro.
understand that, I just want to get it clear in my head. Back to 112, you're considering it to be a bungalow
Yes,
because it's built into, the back end's built into the hillside, even though it's a two-story from the front?
Facing from the front, yeah, and that's standard RMS, so that's what appraisers are supposed to be using for measurements. It's what assessors use, what realtors use. So it's standard RMS measuring
Okay,
systems
just help
where,
me out here. Okay, so the subject property from the street is a two-story on the front, and from the back, it's probably three-story.
hence why there's a suite.
Okay, I'm just trying to get it straight in my mind. Okay, thank you.
Christoph, do you have any questions?
I have a question as well in regards of the bus stop. If it's minimal in decrease in value, what's the increase in value? Because people don't need cars anymore. Now they can use the bus. So is there any gain to have a bus? I mean, I think we're very pleased with the bus system we have in Canmore now. So now there's a bus stop in front of the house. And I'm hearing there's 6 parking spots on the property, including the garage, and parking spots in front of the garage. So
And
what is the potential gain? Have you seen any market data that supports, oh, now we have a bus stop, that's great?
And that's a really good question. So just to point out, there is parking on the street across the street as well, so there's sufficient parking that way. So that's an interesting concept, which is why we feel that likely bus stops are coming out as a negligible amount when we're looking at it, because there's the decrease of, nobody wants anything. You don't want the electrical boxes on your yard. You don't want anything like that on your yard or right next to your yard. But there is obviously the advantage, and especially with the town of Canmore trying to get people to bike more, do more of the public transit, just to try and keep cars off the streets. That definitely is likely a positive for some people as well. I will concede with the complainant, though. I think that everybody would like to be close to a bus stop, but I don't think they would really want the bus stop to be right in front of their property.
So there's no data available to support any gain?
It doesn't show, that's, I think, why you're seeing it really worth nothing or no negative impact, is
Okay.
because there still is the positive there that's counteracting it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Anything else, Chris? No? Okay. Excellent. We're going to move to summaries now. So we will start with the complainant, and then the respondent will have an opportunity to give a summary. And then, Mr. Caldwell, you'll have the chance to say any final words as well. So we'll go ahead with your summary, please. It's,
Just on the basis of London, what it receives combined is not what, that isn't what I would.
so I'm sorry, what?
Oh,
Thanks.
is that on now?
It's on now,
Yes,
yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know I'd touched that.
So I think we'll just address, that evidence we won't be accepting because it wasn't disclosed in the original disclosure package. Yeah, okay.
The picture.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
fine.
I understand that we've,
It was just on to the bungalow aspect.
Perfect,
So-
okay. And sorry, your microphone's on now. Please go ahead, Mr. Caldwell.
It is on, yes, thank you. So, with regards to just the issue and the detrimental fact of bus stops, etc., I'm not anti-buses, etc. Here we've had an alteration in the road layout, which is just not the placing of a bus shelter or something and the bins, etc., on the sidewalk. They've physically altered the road scheme, which is quite an expensive matter. With regards to if I had the funds and I were buying today, I would definitely pay $200,000 more for a property without the encumbrance because the insurance issues and the insurance problems, etc. Because I have to put a disclosure as to whether there are any public works and bins near the property. And sadly, there's an incident, so I'm told now, that the local people are using that for depositing their waste. They're using the bus stop facilities rather than going to the main installations. So there's more intrusion, etc. But The key thing, though, just on the question of on the bus stops and any negative effect, I've noticed in the last 2 years in January, the town of Canmore posts a thing regarding injurious affection claims have to be submitted within 60 days upon the completion of the bus stop works, which isn't suggestive that they have no effect on the value. With regards to the issues as to whether or not it's stated that the December the 31st matters were assessed, there's absolutely no evidence from what's been produced that that did in fact occur. On the contrary, the detailed property report has not been altered. There is no reason discounting of matters or there being any change, because there has been a physical characteristic change. My occupants there who are in their mid-70s have been absolutely devastated by what's happened because of the problems they have getting in and out. And the fact they used to park on the roadside and walk down the drive, they can't do that now. The wider margin has made it very difficult because it's a very short, steep drive getting in and out because the clearance hasn't been done. So there has been a physical change. And with regards to the open market value, I have raised, as I stated, I'm not introducing 112 as evidence with regards to the quantum there impacting on mine, etc., because that would have been very beneficial had I been aware of it. But as I say, I live a long way away. I've been made aware of the sale and been given the particulars. The key thing is it's the requirement to take into account open market sales. That's a very sizable single family home which was constructed just after the completion of my property in 2003. It is a very relevant sales indicator, and to suggest that it's of no relevance when the values have been assessed for 25 being £200,000 apart, $200,000 apart, I think shows that it is an intrinsic comparable. It's a similar value property, but it's directly opposite. And that was not taken into account, and that breaches the regulations. And the very fact that we have no evidence whatsoever as to how the cited comparables, which are at distinctly different locations, have been applied, there is just nothing justifying. There's no reason justification as to how the 2,157,000 has been determined. There is absolutely no detailed reasoning. There is no structured basis or analysis that's been produced. That would not withstand scrutiny in court, and the issue that I have is that the requirements of the Alberta legislation as to how the assessment should incorporate sales between willing buyers and sellers in the open market has not been complied with, and the condition characteristic change has not been recorded at any stage, and it's being ignored. So I think the same process for the subject property in 2023 has been repeated in 24. There's been no alteration at all, and that's an unfortunate and unlawful oversight. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coldwell. Ms. Bannerman, your summary, please.
So the subject property, located at 113 Durgas Gate in Canmore, has been assessed at $2,157,000, and it is the assessor's, the respondent's position that the assessment was prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Municipal Government Act and matters relating to assessment and taxation regulations. So there, just to clarify, there's been some language that's been used saying that there's a lack of compliance to the legislation with regards to the omission of using the sale at 112 Durgas Gate. But I want to make it very clear that this sale was used in the preparation of all of the assessments for the town of Canmore. But it's a different structure type, and we did not feel that it was as comparable to the subject property as the other properties that we would put in our disclosure. So as for any compliance with regards with the legislation, those processes have all been met, those standards have all been met, and we've passed the audit from the provincial government. As for the level of adjustments that were provided by the respondent, the information provided shows sufficient data, both on the chart as well as the residential ratepayer reports that were provided for them all. This shows that the sale price, the assessment of the subject property is reasonable, especially with the absence of evidence that came from the complainant to demonstrate that their assessment is incorrect. So the complainant has referenced the installation of a new bus stop in front of the property. However, as mentioned, there has been no market evidence provided to demonstrate that this has negatively impacted their value. The subject property still has ample parking on site and across the street. Without market evidence or comparable sales to support this claim, there is no basis to reduce the assessment. And I really want to reiterate that under Section 460 sub 7 of the Municipal Government Act, the burden of proof lies with the complainant to show not only that the current assessment is incorrect, but also to provide convincing evidence of what the correct value should be. This standard has not been met, and there is no justification that has been provided to the board to deviate from mass appraisal. And there's been questions about the respondent's responsibility with regards to evidence, and our responsibility is to respond, as in the name, to the evidence that's been provided by the complainant, which we feel that we have done and provided ample information for the board to be able to understand, and the complainant to be able to understand how the assessments were prepared and that they were complying with the legislation. For these reasons, the assessor respectfully requests that the Assessment Review Board confirm the assessment for the property at 113 Durgis Gate at $2,157,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bannerman. Mr. Coldwell, you do have an opportunity if you want to share any final words before we close the hearing.
I think the facts of the matter are that the situation for the subject property, whether we like it or not, is different at December 31st, 2024, than at any stage since 2003. We've heard a lot from the respondent saying that things have been taken into account, and yet there is no evidence, there is no file evidence at all to show that there's been compliance with the recording and taking into account the physical characteristic changes at December 31st, or indeed stating now that the 112 Durgis Gate, which was not referenced at all, was taken into account but disregarded. There is no file evidence at all to support these assertions. It's very convenient to say that these things did happen, but without the evidence, there's no proof whatsoever that the legislative requirements of Alberta were, for this year and in this particular instance, complied with. On the contrary, the 2024 detailed property report for the subject property shows there's no alteration, there's no additional entry since 2003. So I would state as a fact that there is nothing to support the assertion that this matter of the scheme was taken into account and the characteristic aspects satisfied. There is no evidence to support that at all. If it had been listed there and reasoned notes showing as to why or it has or has not been taken into account further in the assessment process, then that would have sufficed, but it's completely bereft of that. So that's an unlawful aspect of the appraisal process. And then with regards to the market evidence, again, we've had properties elsewhere cited for which there's no proof as to how the values have been adjusted. There's absolutely no proof at all as to how these have been applied and if the allowances have been correct or not. You'd expect to see a reasoned explanation and a detailed assessment as to how the various comparables and the sale dates and the different characteristics and how you've, as an experienced person, you've taken that into account in arriving at a figure to be applied to the subject property. There is nothing here that does that at all. But instead, we've got the valuation aspect of open market data, which has been excluded from the process. There's nothing that supports that it was included, because the file and the submission to the ARB shows that nothing on 112 Diergos Gate, which is very comparable property, being a single-family home across the road, has been taken into account. Of course, you need to adjust the data, because no two properties are the same, but it has not been taken into account. And in that respect, the requirements for open market sales data between willing parties, i.e. the vendor and the purchaser, has failed to take place, and that is unlawful, and I'm afraid at variance with what is required. So whilst there's a deflection of trying to state that my evidence, etc., hasn't been compliant and the thing should be dismissed, there is nothing that has occurred in the assessment here which has been compliant under the laws. So the assessment figure is ultra vires and prima facie falls in the first instance, and any reliance on it thereafter is, I'm afraid, unlawful. At judicial review, that would be brought up. So, as I say, I'm sorry that there's been oversight and further oversight on the assessment data and the open market data. And as I say, with regards to evidence as to how comparables have been used, there's nothing on the file to support whether the figure should be 2,300,000, 1.9. There's nothing whatsoever justifying how it's been attained. So what I am being accused of, sadly, the respondent is guilty of, hasn't provided any evidence of justification, but instead has breached the mandatory codes under the Alberta legislation for the undertaking of annual assessments. But I stress, this has only occurred this year, and I'm not suggesting that it's happened elsewhere, but it's unfortunate that it's been identified in regards to the subject property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Coldwell. Before we conclude, I just would like to thank you both for your presentations and for presenting your evidence. I would also like to ask if both parties feel they've been heard today and if they feel that they have received a fair hearing. Yes? Okay, great. So I will declare the hearing closed. So no further evidence or submissions may be received by the board. The Municipal Government Act does require a written decision within 30 days and then gives the clerk an additional 7 days to issue the decision. So we will make every effort as the board to meet or better those requirements, and the clerk will forward our decision to you at your earliest or at her earliest opportunity. So again, thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you for attending in person as well. It was nice to have everyone in the same room. And we appreciate all of the information you've provided. Okay, thank you.